Despite it being sentimental, it wasn't sad. I felt like I gave the pieces a new home and they were mine again, but differently. That's kind of how it felt. So when I would look at the pieces, I wouldn't actually feel sad that my parents aren't here anymore.
Welcome to my Kakaibahay.
Well, the house is new. We moved in August of 2018, but the lot where it stands is the place where I grew up. So we're in Alabang, south of Manila. We moved here when I was 7, and the lot beside where our house was purchased by my parents in the early 80s. This is adjacent to where my mom lived, and this was our yard and on our garage. When I finally had my own family, took a while, took years, but we decided to build a house here and move in. So the house is meaningful in the sense that it's built on a property that means a lot to me because I grew up in this property. My mom was very thrilled when finally we decided to build our house here because she's very close to my kids. I have two, ages 14 and 7, and she wanted to live beside them. When we finally decided to build, unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer and she passed away 6 months before we moved in. Although she knew that the house was already being constructed, and then we moved in. When my mom passed, I decided to live in her house, which was right next door, and there was actually a connecting gate in the house because it's right next door. So that's where we stayed. We stayed in her house. We made sure it wasn't vacant. So napaaga yung pag-alis namin from our old house. And it was strange because my husband and my kids were already breaking in the house using the showers and the bathrooms. Here in the new house, I was the last one to do that because I think in a way I was kind of holding on to staying in my mom's house. So when we finally will move everything in now, we'll live here already. My very first night and day here was very strange. But eventually, I got used to it. The design of the house, as we wanted it, was supposed to be modern, contemporary. But when we moved in, 6 months after my mom had passed, I decided that the furniture she left behind, I would just take in. One, for practical reasons, it would just save me money, and I didn't know where to put them anyway. So I brought in the furniture to our house, and somehow it worked. All these old furnitures that I grew up with, and some which were even given by my own grandparents. So I like it in the sense that at least there's continuity. So even if my mom and dad, because my dad had collections naman of paintings, the house kind of felt like it was really ours. So that's what I thought was unique about it. And it all happened organically. Initially, I knew the ones I would bring in. My sister, who lives abroad, she's younger than me by a year. But when we moved in, she was one of our first guests. So she came here with her family to try and help me with the move and to try and help me with editing the stuff. So that was a big help because at least I had her help in what we would keep, what she was okay with keeping, and what she was okay with letting go. The initial things that I really decided on was everything that belonged to my maternal grandmother, we would take in. Kasi that's part of our history. I remember my mom bringing that from their house in the province that they grew up in and eventually bringing it to our house. So to me, because that was very sentimental and it meant a lot to her, it was beautiful. I decided I'm going to take that with me. So I took those first. Instagram and Pinterest were my friends. When I moved in to the house, I'd look for inspiration. So I kind of just put stuff in which stuff I felt fit slowly because I didn't want it to look cluttered. I was very clear on the house because I grew up in a house that was in the 80s. Everything was maximalist. And my mom was sort of like that. That was her style. So chandeliers and antiques. And we even have a life-size statue of a religious statue. And that was creepy. Growing up in a house like that looked like a museum. That was what my friend said. The house looked like a museum. I didn't want that. I wanted a more relaxed feel because I work. My husband and I are both doctors, and we wanted to come home to a house that was more minimalist. One that I knew I would bring in was the grandfather clock, which we had since I would say the mid-80s. My mom bought it in Europe and went there for a vacation, and it's been with us since. I knew it would somehow be off in the look of the house, but when I brought it in, it just kind of blended. So that was the very first thing that I brought in. And of course, the bed that belonged to my grandparents, which was my bed when I was living in their house, which is now my daughter's bed. The biggest surprise was a painting that my dad had bought. It was a big painting of carabaos. It said Buenaventura, 1976. I had no clue what the artist was, so I decided to Google it, and the signature belonged to Cesar Buenaventura. And I thought, oh my God, I can't let this go. So I decided to take that, and I brought it into my living room. And the funny thing was, the day that I took it in, the day when I found out about it, was my dad's birthday. He had passed away na rin. He passed away 2011, my mom 2018. So it felt like a birthday gift from him during his birthday. So I felt that that was my dad's way of saying, take this with you. I would rather that you take this with you. So that's my favorite because it was such a lovely surprise. When I brought guests in, when I was still editing and putting it in, everyone was saying that it was really nicely done. I would have to credit my architect for that. My husband and I really said that he has a good sense of aesthetics. That was nice because my friends would come in and they would say, parang pang magazine. And my husband's relatives from abroad, we would take them in as guests. And it was nice to tell them, because they would ask about the pieces, so it was nice to tell them those stories. So the general reaction was nicely built house, and I'm flattered every time they would comment on how the furniture was not out of place in a new house, old stuff in a new house. Give yourself time, but give yourself also a deadline. Because in a way, if I probably did not have inquiries for a tenant, I wouldn't have the motivation to clear it out. I would still be there. So I think give yourself a timeline also to sift through the things. There were some things I kind of regret letting go of, but then when I think about it now, I don't want to accumulate stuff that don't make sense in my new house. It has to make sense. It has to have a function, or at least a sense of aesthetics that would make sense in the house. So I guess that was my guide when I was sifting through this stuff. Will this make sense pa to keep? Or will this be gathering dust in my space and taking up space? Despite it being sentimental, it wasn't sad. I felt like I gave the pieces a new home and they were mine again, but differently. That's kind of how it felt. So when I would look at the pieces, I wouldn't actually feel sad that my parents aren't here anymore, or I would see pictures, old pictures of where they used to be in our house. And it wouldn't be a sad feeling. It would be more of, I gave it a new life in a way because it looks different in my space, but it's just nice that it's the same thing, but it's updated in a way. And mine still, but differently. So that's what I found unique about it, that it was a continuation. It was really a home. It was really ours.
Actually, building this tiny house is not planned. So, ayun, dito kami na lockdown. Kaya, napag-isipan namin na mag-build dito, di ba? That,